What if I told you that some of humanity's greatest spiritual discoveries came not from meditation alone, but from a sacred plant that modern society has criminalized and demonized? For thousands of years, ancient civilizations across the globe have used cannabis as a direct pathway to divine consciousness. They didn't see it as a drug or an escape from reality. They saw it as a key to understanding the very nature of existence itself. From the sacred temples of ancient India to the mystery schools of Egypt, from the shamanic traditions of Central Asia to the healing ceremonies of ancient China, cannabis was revered as one of the most powerful tools for spiritual awakening. These weren't primitive peoples experimenting with random plants. These were sophisticated cultures with advanced understanding of consciousness, astronomy, mathematics, and the hidden laws governing reality. But here's what they don't want you to know. The spiritual discoveries these civilizations made using cannabis were so powerful, so threatening to systems of control, that the knowledge was systematically buried. The practices were outlawed, and the plant itself changed from sacred medicine into forbidden substance. The sacred soma of ancient India. Long before cannabis became controversial, it was considered one of the most sacred substances on earth. In the ancient Vedic texts of India, dating back over 4,000 years, we find references to a mysterious plant called soma. It was described as the drink of the gods, the nectar of immortality, the key to divine consciousness. For centuries, scholars debated what soma actually was. But mounting evidence suggests that soma was cannabis, or at least included cannabis as one of its primary ingredients. The Rig Veda, one of humanity's oldest spiritual texts, contains over 100 hymns dedicated to soma. It describes the plant as something that makes mortals immortal and opens the doors to the gods. The ancient Indian text, Atharva Veda, calls cannabis one of the 5 sacred plants that release us from anxiety. It describes the plant as a guardian spirit, a divine protector that brings joy and courage to those who approach it with reverence. This wasn't recreational use. This was sacrament, as holy as communion wine in Christianity. The great god Shiva himself was known as the Lord of Bhang, consuming cannabis as part of his spiritual practice. Hindu traditions tell us that Shiva discovered the divine properties of cannabis while meditating in the Himalayas. When he consumed the plant, his consciousness expanded beyond the physical world, allowing him to perceive the cosmic dance of creation and destruction that governs all existence. But what exactly did these ancient practitioners discover when they used cannabis spiritually? According to the texts, the plant opened what they called the third eye. This was a state of consciousness where the boundaries between self and universe dissolve. Users reported direct communication with divine beings, visions of past and future lives, and understanding of cosmic laws that govern reality itself. The tantric traditions of ancient India took this even further. They developed sophisticated practices combining cannabis with meditation, breathwork, and sacred geometry. These weren't random experiments, but carefully designed techniques for achieving what they called samadhi, a state of consciousness where individual awareness merges with universal consciousness. Modern neuroscience is beginning to understand how this works. Cannabis contains compounds called cannabinoids that interact with the brain's endocannabinoid system. This is a network of receptors that regulate everything from mood to memory to perception of time and space. When activated by cannabis, this system can produce states of consciousness that mystics have described for thousands of years. Ego dissolution, expanded awareness, and direct perception of what ancient texts call the unity behind all things, the mystery schools of ancient Egypt. The ancient Egyptians possessed knowledge of consciousness and reality that modern science is only beginning to rediscover. Their pyramids demonstrate mathematical precision that would be challenging to achieve even today. Their understanding of astronomy was so advanced that they aligned their monuments with celestial cycles spanning thousands of years. And at the heart of their most sacred ceremonies was a plant they called Shemet, a word that many scholars now believe referred to cannabis. The Edwin Smith Papyrus, dating to around 1600 BCE, contains one of the earliest written references to cannabis in Egyptian medical texts. But the plant wasn't just medicine. It was an essential component of their spiritual practices. Traces of cannabis have been found in the tombs of Egyptian nobles, and hieroglyphic inscriptions suggest it was used in the most sacred rituals of the mystery schools. These mystery schools were where Egypt's greatest secrets were taught. Only the most advanced students were admitted, and only after years of preparation and testing. Inside these schools, initiates learned about the true nature of consciousness, the structure of reality, and the techniques for achieving what they called enlightenment, a state where human awareness merges with divine awareness. Cannabis played a crucial role in these teachings. The plant was seen as a direct gift from the gods, a substance that could temporarily lift the veil between the physical and spiritual worlds. When used properly, it allowed initiates to experience states of consciousness described in the ancient texts: out-of-body travel, communication with non-physical beings, and direct perception of what they called the eternal now, a timeless dimension underlying all temporal experience. The ancient Egyptian text, known as the Book of Coming Forth by Day, contains detailed descriptions of consciousness after death. These descriptions match remarkably well with modern accounts of near-death experiences and the effects reported by those who use cannabis in spiritual contexts. A sense of leaving the physical body, movement through tunnels of light, encounters with wise beings, and a deep understanding that consciousness continues beyond physical death. The shamanic traditions of Central Asia. In the mountains and steppes of Central Asia, among peoples who would later be called Scythians, cannabis wasn't just a plant. It was a direct connection to the spirit world. These nomadic peoples developed some of the most sophisticated shamanic practices in human history, and cannabis was at the center of their spiritual technology. The Greek historian Herodotus, writing in the 5th century BCE, described Scythian funeral rituals where mourners would enter special tents and burn cannabis seeds, creating clouds of smoke that would make them howl with joy. But this wasn't recreational use. This was sacred ceremony, a way of communicating with the spirits of the dead and receiving guidance from other dimensions. Archaeological evidence supports Herodotus's account. In 1929, archaeologists discovered a 2,400-year-old Scythian burial site in the Altai Mountains containing a leather pouch filled with cannabis seeds and a bronze brazier for burning them. Even more remarkably, they found the mummified remains of a shaman whose stomach contained traces of cannabis, suggesting he had consumed the plant as part of his final ritual. The Scythian shamans understood something that modern society has forgotten. Cannabis doesn't just change brain chemistry. It opens channels of perception that allow consciousness to access information normally hidden from ordinary awareness. These shamans use the plant to diagnose illness, predict the future, communicate with spirits, and guide their communities through spiritual crises. Their techniques were sophisticated and precise. Different strains of cannabis were used for different purposes. The strength and method of consumption varied depending on the intended spiritual outcome. Preparation included fasting, purification rituals, and specific prayers designed to create the proper mental and spiritual conditions for the experience. But perhaps most importantly, the Scythian shamans understood that cannabis was not the source of their power. It was simply a bridge that helped them access power that already existed within consciousness itself. They taught that every human being possessed the ability to perceive beyond the physical world, to communicate with non-physical intelligence, and to access information from what they called the Great Mind. This was a field of consciousness that connects all things, the healing temples of ancient China. While the West was still emerging from the Dark Ages, ancient China had already developed one of the most sophisticated medical systems in human history. At the heart of this system was a deep understanding of what they called qi, the life energy that flows through all living things. And one of their most powerful tools for working with this energy was a plant they called ma, cannabis. The legendary Emperor Shen Nong, who lived around 2700 BCE, is credited with discovering the medicinal properties of hundreds of plants. According to Chinese tradition, he tested each plant on himself, carefully documenting their effects on both physical and spiritual health. Cannabis was one of his most important discoveries. He called it one of the superior medicines, substances that could be used regularly without harmful side effects and that provided benefits to both body and spirit. But the Chinese approach to cannabis was different from other cultures. Rather than focusing primarily on its consciousness-changing effects, they were most interested in its ability to balance and harmonize the body's energy systems. They discovered that cannabis could help regulate what they called the flow of qi, the movement of life energy through specific channels in the body. According to traditional Chinese medicine, illness occurs when qi becomes blocked or imbalanced. Cannabis was found to be particularly effective at removing these blockages and restoring proper energy flow. But more than that, it helped practitioners develop the sensitivity needed to perceive qi directly, to actually feel the movement of life energy through their own bodies and the bodies of their patients. The Taoist masters took this understanding even further. They developed practices combining cannabis with meditation, breathing techniques, and movement exercises designed to refine and purify consciousness. Their goal wasn't just health, but what they called immortality. Not living forever in a physical body, but achieving a state of consciousness that goes beyond physical death. The medical text Shen Nong Ben Chao Jing, written around 100 CE, describes cannabis as a substance that makes one communicate with spirits and lightens one's body. This wasn't poetic language. It was an accurate description of the plant's effects on consciousness. Cannabis appeared to make the boundary between physical and spiritual more permeable, allowing practitioners to gather information and guidance from non-physical sources. What modern science is discovering. For decades, cannabis research was severely limited by legal restrictions and cultural stigma. But as laws change and scientific attitudes evolve, researchers are finally able to study what ancient civilizations knew intuitively. Cannabis has unique effects on consciousness that go far beyond simple intoxication. Recent studies using brain imaging technology show that cannabis affects neural networks in ways that mirror the changes seen in experienced meditators. The plant appears to quiet the default mode network, the brain circuits responsible for self-referential thinking and the sense of being a separate self. When this network becomes less active, people report feelings of unity, interconnection, and expanded awareness, the same experiences described in ancient spiritual texts. Dr. Robin Carhart-Harris at Imperial College London has conducted groundbreaking research on the neural basis of consciousness-changing experiences. His studies suggest that substances like cannabis don't create new experiences so much as they remove filters that normally limit perception. In other words, these plants may actually show aspects of reality that are normally hidden from ordinary consciousness. This matches exactly what ancient traditions taught. Cannabis doesn't create spiritual experiences. It removes the barriers that prevent us from perceiving the spiritual dimensions of existence that are always present. The plant acts like a key that opens doors of perception that have been closed by conditioning, fear, and the demands of ordinary survival. Recent research has also confirmed the therapeutic benefits that ancient healers recognized thousands of years ago. Studies show that cannabis can be effective for treating depression, anxiety, PTSD, chronic pain, and a wide range of other conditions. But more than just treating symptoms, The plant appears to help people gain new perspectives on their problems and develop greater resilience and emotional flexibility. Perhaps most remarkably, some researchers are beginning to study the spiritual and mystical experiences that cannabis can produce. A 2021 study published in the Journal of Psychoactive Drugs found that many people who use cannabis report experiences that meet the criteria for mystical experiences as defined by researchers. These included feelings of unity with the universe, going beyond time and space, deep peace and love, and a sense of encountering ultimate reality. The suppression of sacred knowledge. If cannabis has such deep spiritual and therapeutic benefits, why has it been so thoroughly demonized and criminalized in modern society? The answer shows one of the most systematic suppressions of spiritual knowledge in human history. The criminalization of cannabis began not with concerns about public health, but with efforts to control specific populations and maintain existing power structures. In the early 20th century, cannabis prohibition was closely linked to racism against Mexican immigrants and efforts to suppress minority communities. The plant was demonized not because of its effects, but because of who was using it. But there was a deeper agenda at work. Cannabis prohibition was part of a broader effort to suppress spiritual practices and knowledge that could threaten established systems of control. Throughout history, those in power have understood that spiritually awakened people are difficult to control. They think for themselves, question authority, and refuse to accept systems that don't serve human well-being. The ancient mystery schools and shamanic traditions that used cannabis were repositories of knowledge about consciousness, healing, and the true nature of reality. This knowledge was seen as dangerous by religious and political authorities who based their power on keeping people ignorant and dependent. Even today, the real reasons for continuing cannabis prohibition have little to do with public health and everything to do with maintaining systems of control. The pharmaceutical industry profits from treating symptoms rather than addressing root causes. The prison system profits from criminalizing consciousness exploration. And political systems profit from keeping people fearful and dependent rather than empowered and self-reliant, reclaiming the sacred path. As we stand at the threshold of a new era in human consciousness, we have the opportunity to reclaim the sacred relationship with cannabis that our ancestors knew. But this isn't about simply legalizing a substance. It's about remembering a way of being that honors the spiritual dimensions of existence. The ancient traditions offer us a roadmap. They show us that cannabis is not a drug to be consumed casually, but a sacred medicine to be approached with respect, preparation, and clear intention. They teach us that the plant's greatest gifts come not from using it to escape reality, but from using it to perceive reality more clearly. True spiritual use of cannabis requires what the ancients called set and setting, proper mental preparation and appropriate environmental conditions. It requires understanding that the experiences the plant can facilitate are real and meaningful, not just chemical effects on the brain. And it requires integration, taking the insights and awareness gained during cannabis experiences and applying them to create positive changes in daily life. The ancient wisdom also teaches us that cannabis is not for everyone and not for every situation. Like any powerful medicine, it must be used wisely and with respect for both its benefits and its potential risks. The goal is not to be constantly changed, but to use changed states of consciousness as tools for growth, healing, and spiritual development. As more research emerges and social attitudes continue to evolve, we have the opportunity to move beyond the extremes of both prohibition and commercialization toward a middle path that honors the sacred nature of this plant while making its benefits available to those who can use them responsibly. The ancient civilizations that used cannabis spiritually discovered something amazing. Consciousness is not confined to the brain, but is a fundamental aspect of reality itself. Cannabis, when used with proper intention and preparation, can serve as a key to open dimensions of awareness that show our true nature and our connection to the cosmic order. In a world increasingly disconnected from nature, from each other, and from the sacred dimensions of existence, perhaps it's time to remember what our ancestors knew. Perhaps it's time to approach this remarkable plant not as a recreational drug or a medical commodity, but as what it has always been: a teacher, a healer, and a bridge between the ordinary and the extraordinary aspects of human consciousness.